Welcome back to the Microsoft DP-600 practice questions series. Implementing analytics solutions using Microsoft Fabric. This is episode 10. Continuing with pipelines, data flows, and data loading, part 2. Over the next 10 questions, we'll cover SQL endpoint access, OneLake shortcuts, file formats, copy and partitioning, data flow profiling, medallion layers, and delta table maintenance. Each question gives you 10 seconds. Let's begin. Question 1 of 10. Lakehouse 1 contains Table 1, a delta table created via a shortcut, Table 2, an external table created with Spark, and Table 3, a managed table. You connect to Lakehouse 1 using its SQL Analytics endpoint. What will you be able to do? Review the options on screen. You have 10 seconds. The correct answer is A. The Lakehouse SQL Analytics endpoint is read-only and surfaces the Lakehouse's managed delta tables, so you can read Table 3. The endpoint can't update any data, ruling out both update options, and the externally created Spark table isn't exposed for querying the same way a managed table is. Question 2 of 10. You plan to query sales data files stored in an Amazon S3 bucket by using the Lakehouse SQL Analytics endpoint. You need to recommend a file format and where to create the shortcut. Which 2 actions should you include? Review the options on screen. You have 10 seconds. The correct answers are B and D. Parquet is a compressed, columnar format the SQL endpoint queries efficiently, and creating the shortcut in the Tables section exposes the data as a queryable table through the SQL endpoint. A file section shortcut isn't surfaced as a table, and CSV is a slow, row-based format for analytical queries. Question 3 of 10. Lakehouse 1 has a subfolder, Subfolder 1, containing CSV files. You need to convert the CSV files into the delta format with V-order optimization enabled. What should you do from Lakehouse Explorer? Review the options on screen. You have 10 seconds. The correct answer is A. The Load to Tables feature reads files and writes them into managed delta tables, and it applies V-order optimization by default. Shortcuts only reference the files without converting them, and Optimize compacts an existing delta table rather than converting CSV files. Question 4 of 10. Lakehouse 1 has an unpartitioned table, Table 1. You create a copy activity to load data into Table 1 and want to partition it on a date column. To specify the partition column in the destination settings, what should you do first? Review the options on screen. You have 10 seconds. The correct answer is D. Partitioning an existing unpartitioned table means recreating it, which only overwrite mode does. The partition column option isn't available in append mode. So you set the destination mode to overwrite first, then choose the partition column. Partition discovery on the source reads partitioned source folders. It doesn't define the destination's partitioning. Question 5 of 10. Workspace 1 has Lakehouse 1 with a table sales. Workspace 2 has Lakehouse 2 with a table customers. You need to write queries that reference both tables in the same SQL query without making additional copies of the tables. What should you use? Review the options on screen. You have 10 seconds. The correct answer is A. A OneLake shortcut makes a table from another workspace's Lakehouse appear in your Lakehouse without copying the data, so both sales and customers can be referenced in one query. A dataflow or managed table would copy the data, and a view can't span separate lakehouses without an underlying shortcut. Question 6 of 10. Dataflow 1 returns 500 rows. You need to identify the minimum and maximum values for each column in the query results. Which 3 data view options should you select? Review the options on screen. You have 10 seconds. The correct answers are B and C and E. Enabling the column profile computes per column summary statistics including minimum and maximum. To see them, you also show the column profile in the Details pane and enable the Details pane itself. Value distribution and column quality details show other information, not the min-max statistics. Question 7 of 10. You are implementing a Medallion architecture in one Fabric workspace. You need to choose the most appropriate pipeline activity to populate each layer. Match a pipeline activity to each layer. Match each item to the correct choice. Review the options on screen. You have 10 seconds. Here are the correct matches shown on screen. Bronze ingests raw source data as is, which a copy activity moves efficiently. Silver cleans and reshapes the data, which a dataflow power query activity does with low-code transformations. Gold produces business-level aggregates, typically built with set-based SQL in a stored procedure activity. Question 8 of 10. A delta table in Lakehouse 1 has 1 million Parquet files. You need to remove files that were not referenced by the table during the past 30 days, keeping the transaction log consistent and preserving the table's ACID properties. What should you do? Review the options on screen. You have 10 seconds. The correct answer is D. Vacuum removes data files that are no longer referenced by the delta table beyond the retention period, while keeping the transaction log consistent and preserving ACID guarantees. Deleting files manually from storage would corrupt the log and optimize compacts and reorders files rather than removing unreferenced ones. Question 9 of 10. Table 1 has columns transaction ID, date, product ID, product color, product name, and sales amount. You load it into a star schema with a product dimension dim product and a fact table fact sales. Which 3 columns should you include in dim product? Review the options on screen. You have 10 seconds. The correct answer is A. A product dimension holds the descriptive attributes of a product, its key product ID plus product name and product color. Sales amount and transaction ID are transaction-level measures keys that belong in fact sales, and date belongs in a separate date dimension. Question 10 of 10. A delta table named customer queries slowly, and you suspect maintenance was not performed. You need to identify whether maintenance tasks were performed on customer. Proposed solution: run the Spark SQL statement refresh table customer. Does this meet the goal? Review the options on screen. You have 10 seconds. The correct answer is B. Refresh table only refreshes the table's cached metadata, so queries pick up the latest schema and data, It reveals nothing about whether maintenance such as optimize or vacuum was run. To see maintenance history, you would inspect the Delta transaction log, for example with describe history. And that's all 10 questions on pipelines, data flows, and data loading, part 2. How many did you get right out of 10? Let me know in the comments. Episode 11 moves on to security, RLS, and governance. Subscribe so you don't miss it, and please like and share if this helped. See you in episode 11.